we explore Talhoffer's Messerfechten.
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
The fighting books or Fechtbücher by Hans Talhoffer are rather famous because there are several of them and they are easily accessible, and so they have become widespreadly known. If we look at these Fechtbücher from the 15th century, we will have a lot of techniques with the German longsword, and we will have a lot of techniques with the dagger, and we will have a lot of techniques in wrestling, and depending on the version there will be other aspects included. In many of them there's no specific section on Messerfechten. Messer, just to mention, means knife, and a knife is a one-edged close quarter weapon, and it was common in Germany and at the time, and there are at least some Fechtbücher that concentrate on that. In Talhoffer there are only short sections, and we will have a look at these in detail. The first technique is very simple. We get an attack on angle 1. We use the Zornhut, principle a variation of the Wacht, so it's a kind of a roof block, to deflect the incoming attack, and then the left arm entangles the blade of the opponent. There are different versions where it more entangles the arm or where it more entangles the blade. You can now say, oh, why should I entangle the blade in this way? This is dangerous. Yeah, in fact, it's not really dangerous, because if the blade is properly locked, you cannot easily get cut in this way. Interestingly, this technique appears several times in some of these Fechtbücher, namely once without the buckler, so just with a Messer, and once again with a buckler. This is a bit strange, why the same technique is shown twice, but it could also mean that there were not so many techniques concerning Messerfechten for Talhoffer. In one of the Fechtbücher there is a sequence of images that you could interpret in a way that there's an attack from angle 2, and from here force is redirected also into the Zornhut, which means in this way we can use the same technique with a different starting point against angle 2. This usually makes sense if you have the same technique not only applicable from one direction but from several directions, because it means you need less techniques to cover more attacks of the opponent. This makes sense in any fighting context, also in modern self-defense. While this transition from a flug-like position into the Zornhut is only implied for Messer and buckler, we can of course also use that without the buckler, just with the Messer, because the mechanics stays the same, and then we also have here a version against angle 2 that we can use for getting control over the weapon of the opponent. If we compare this very technique to some other fighting styles, we can recognize that this technique is very common in different styles of Filipino martial arts, so Kali, Escrima, Arnis, and we would usually refer to this as a snake disarm, although snake disarm can be performed in two directions. This is basically a figure 4 type of disarm, and also in Japanese martial arts we know this technique in Bujinkan, Budo Taijutsu. This is, for example, usually referred to as Gojadori or Mushadori. There is an arm lock, but the overall motion stays the same. While this very motion is a counterclockwise technique, Talhoffer offers a second technique with the Messer, a clockwise technique. In this case, we also get an attack from angle 1. We receive with the unicorn, with the Einhorn position, so basically this is a kind of Schielhau, but you really should use thumb hold here. You can see in the original drawing that the wrist is a bit bent, which is usually not advisable, so use the thumb, then your wrist can be straight. Then the incoming force will force your blade to flip over, so your grip, your handle comes to the front, the attack of the opponent is redirected. You can now use your handle to hook at the wrist of the opponent, and your left arm to either perform an arm bar, so control the arm via a joint lock, or to push away over the elbow. It's not possible to act against this for the opponent and then stab him or cut him with your own messer. It should not come as a big surprise that also here we see the same pattern as on the other side. We not only have this technique with only the messer, we also see the exact same technique with messer and buckler. So again, we have basically the same technique shown again. This could be either understood as a kind of a filler, so more pages, seemingly more techniques, but in fact having the same technique, or as an important explanatory add-on to say, hey, this not only works with the blade weapon alone, but also in the combination with a buckler. So the other technique, the snake technique, was reversible, so it was somehow usable also against angle 2. Do we find an example that this technique, which we could basically describe as an ikkyo or ikacho from Aikido, could also be used against angle 2? And there is something like it to a certain degree. The match is not perfect, but at least the principle stays the same. So against angle 2, we can defend with something like a fluke position, and then we can use the buckler to push away the elbow and stab the opponent. And if this works with the buckler, we should not be too surprised that of course this will also work without the buckler. Again, same principle. If it works with the buckler, we can make it work without the buckler. Although this technique is not specifically shown, at least I'm not sure whether it is specifically shown in one of the Talhoffer Fechtbücher. Overall, I find it a bit strange that there are so few messer techniques in Talhoffer. Maybe it's because a lot of these techniques were thought to be used in specific duels with specific pairings, and there were no common pairings with the messer, but for an everyday self-defense thinking scheme, I would have expected more of this Messerfechten. And we know that other Fechtbücher are specifically dedicated to especially this very type of fighting. Of course, we can argue that we could translate a lot of the other techniques that Talhoffer is offering to the messer, but still it's a bit of a surprise to me. For example, that there is no follow-up joint lock on angle 2 in the principle of the second technique we looked at is surprising, because in Filipino martial arts there are two solutions at least for that. One's using the blade from above, or the other way around, to use the handle from below to do exactly that. Also, there are some dagger techniques in Talhoffer that you could perfectly adapt for exactly this situation. So I don't know why Messerfechten is very simplified with Talhoffer. There are some more techniques, if you want to call them like that, where he shows how to cut off the hand of the opponent. But of the sophisticated, more complex techniques, we basically have only two, but they are shown in several instances and, as pointed out, with buckler and without buckler. And so this, what we showed here, is basically the overview of the entire more sophisticated Messerfechten that all the Talhoffer books have to offer. Hope we could inspire you. See you around next time.